So, guys, welcome. Welcome to the Polarity Code Module 4. So today we are going to touch a very interesting subject, the shadow child and coherence of wholeness. So I welcome you once more, and we are going to cover this very difficult and important territory of inner battlefield, the fractured self, and the reunion of our original wholeness. So guys, let's start our session with dropping down to our breath. So I invite you to place your hand on your heart space and let's drop down into our breath for a few minutes with deep inhalations and deep exhalations. Now let's open the directions. I open the south for the serpent to teach us how to shed old skins. I open the west for the jaguar to help us walk through shadow with courage. I open the north for the hummingbird to drink from the nectar of the sacred. I open the east for the eagle to grant us higher vision. And I open the earth for Pachamama, who knows all that we bury. And I open Father Sky for the Great Spirit to hold us as we remember. So guys, we will start as usually with a little bit of reading and reflections on this very important topic that we are going to touch today, the fractured self and the shadow child. So the mythical teachings of Hermeticism are teaching us as well that gender is in everything, and everything has its masculine and feminine principles or poles. So when we touch this principle of Hermeticism towards the inner child, we can then speak about or think about deeper how the balance of these two poles is distorted at the very root of our being. So, as we know, every child is born whole, but through trauma, neglect, unmet needs, misattunements, this child learns how to split. And then one of the parts adapts and another part hides. One part performs and one part retreats. And this is the beginning of the fractured self at a very young age. And we can call this the inner battlefield, which we are not even aware of. So in Jungian psychology, this is what we call the shadow, the parts of us that were exiled so that we in our childhood can win love. So this child learned that rage must be hidden, that sensitivity is weakness, that desire is dangerous, and that power is shameful. So we disown these things. And the psychology of the shadow says, per rule, what we disown, we project outwardly. So the shadow child, in a way, becomes a projector. And this means that we sometimes lash out at the needy because we deny our own needs. So we can also judge. We can judge loud because we were silenced. Our own voice was silenced when we were small. So this can be even shown as fearing intimacy because the child inside us still is fearing to be abandoned. So we can in a way say that it's not a problem that we have a shadow, but the problem is that we believe our unconscious programs that this is our only performance. And then this distortion is creating what we can call polarity wounds. And this can show as overactive masculine in adulthood. And this shows as dominance and control. At the feminine polarity, it shows as chaos or emotional dependency. So through these shadowy experiences, we learn how to swing and collapse, and then we learn how to armor up to protect ourselves. And when that happens, we actually begin to hurt the ones we love. And we even don't know why we are doing that, because we are projecting these wounded parts of ourselves, which were reflected to us while we were children. So, guys, I want to call in a reflection in the first part of the session. And I would like to ask you a few questions, and I'd be happy if you would engage with me a little bit in this. So, what part of you did you exile to be loved? Is there one of you that would be happy to answer? If there is a certain part of you that you had to exile to be loved by someone?
My honesty.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Well, that must have been hard, Miko. Thank you for sharing. Well, then let me ask another question. What was the first mask that you wore to survive?
This quiet that I did not speak anymore, what was in my mind, what I thought was supposed to be spoken. Or so.
Oh, very difficult. Thank you for sharing.
I wore a mask of independence, of not needing anyone.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. These are some very intimate sharings. Thank you, guys. So let's continue a little bit more in depth with this subject. And we can start by reading a little bit of Rumi, just a short poem from. So Rumi says, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. So this is beautifully said, and this also touches, in a way, this inner child woundings. When as we reflect as adults, when we get to that point that we are able to look at these wounded parts of ourselves, well, this poem is really very descriptive of that energetic state. So this invisible child within, we can speak about that this invisible child is living within every adult. And it's kind of like breathing this energetic imprint. And this child actually is like an emotional blueprint. It's like our pre-programming before we became adult. And it's like the first mirror that we were given, like the original template of how we saw love and safety and self-worth. And all of these things were reflected back to us. So psychologist Jung called it the shadow. But these are the repressed parts or hidden parts of ourselves. So this shadow child emerges in the moments of pain, conflict, or intimacy. It actually governs our fears of abandonment, our cravings for validation. And the big fact is that most of the people are unaware of how powerful this is, how this inner child is governing our adult relationships in reality. And when we function in our lives unacknowledged of this, well, then these woundings become like a lens, like a projector outwardly. And we're not just seeing through this lens, but we are also acting through it and loving through it. And often we come to hurt somebody through this lens, which we have been hurt by. So the shadow as a projection is a part of the unconscious mind, which is consisting of these repressed weaknesses, desires, and instincts. So when we disown these parts, we project them always onto others. So this inner child, when it's unacknowledged and unmet, it becomes the loudest projector of them all. So these woundings are really some of our core woundings, which we then emotionally in adulthood project and reflect. So we can make a few examples. If a child grew up feeling unworthy, well, then the child might reject love that comes too easily, in a way. So if a child was emotionally abandoned, then it may cling or sabotage or provoke distance. So if a child were never allowed to express anger, for example, it may attract really explosive partners who express this anger, which was suppressed in the childhood. So this tells us that we actually recreate the emotional environment of our childhood, of our upbringing, because it's familiar to us. It's like a habitual part of our brain. And of course, we know that the psyche is always loyal to the facts and to the things, energies that are known to the psyche, because the psyche and the ego always function best in the known, in the loops, in repetition, in habitual parts of ourselves. And we can say that the inner child woundings are deeply habitual and deeply familiar, because these are some of our deepest energetic imprints. So this also connects to a very important aspect of us often attracting in adulthood people that mirror our wounds, or and seldomly mirroring our dreams. It's mostly the woundings that get projected. So, guys, we can also connect these aspects of the polarity, of the shadow, of the unhealed parts of ourselves to an ancient Hermetic teaching. And this teaching says that all is mind and the universe is mental. So our internal programming, and especially from childhood, is in a way vibratory. So these emotional experiences, they encode beliefs into our nervous system and into our magnetic field. And since this inner child is holding most of our primal frequencies, like survival, connection, love, fear, so these frequencies actually magnetize reality back to us. So important this is. So healing the inner child is not just a matter of emotional hygiene. This is like the ultimate quantum alignment for us to achieve. So how can we repattern these wounds then? How can we heal ourselves? And there are a few solutions, and neuroscience speaks about that. So, as we know, the brain is neuroplastic. It's capable of forming new neural pathways. So this means that repeated emotional experiences in childhood, they kind of form these default modes in the brain. So the child who had to please somebody to receive something, it may develop loving relationship to fawning tendencies. For an example, the child who was ignored may develop hypervigilance or dissociation. The child who witnessed chaos may develop control patterns to create safety. So these become, in a way, like survival adaptations. We cannot call them flaws, because this is simply functioning from our survival mechanism, from our ancient brain. But there is a medicine here, because when we make these patterns conscious, then they can be rewired. So the tools are somatic therapy. So this means body-based rewiring. Why is that important? Because often our traumas and our woundings are stored in our tissues, in our bodies. And this is in a way inhibiting our maximal movement freedom and also reinforcing our neural and emotional woundings and the patterns of those. So second way of dealing with the inner child woundings is consciously breathing, like conscious breath work. Why is this important? Because this kind of allows us to access deeper emotional layers of ourselves. It even allows us to sometimes to override these subconscious routines, which are actually the place where we hold and store these inner child woundings. So it's very important that we help ourselves with conscious breath, oxygenation. So inner child woundings can also be dealt with by journaling and by also, in a way, through journaling, reparenting ourselves, looking at the patterns of our journaling and creating a common recognition, a pattern which, so to say, can help us realize where is the place that I have to look at and observe more to be able to work on my woundings and heal my woundings, make them visible, make them touch the light. Because once when these woundings touch the light, they actually become empowerment. So we can also use different emotional coherence practices. And this is simply disciplinedly practicing emotions like gratitude, safety, forgiveness. Meditations are beautiful. All of these practices are engaging our conscious mind. And in a way, the conscious mind is that tool which enables us to observe ourselves from outside. And that enables us to see the patterns and to see the woundings from outside by observing them. And then by simply observation and noticing, we can be able to work on our woundings and to heal ourselves at these spots which need to be recognized and brought to light. So through a mythic lens, we can speak about this notion of the lost child in the forest. So in many of indigenous and mythological traditions, the hero's journey kind of begins with loss, with exile, with wounding. And this child is, in a way, left alone in the forest. And it symbolizes this archetypal symbol of chaos, confusion, and transformation. So likewise, within the psyche, the inner masculine must return to protect the child, and the inner feminine must return to nurture the child. So when the abandoned child meets these two within ourselves, then kind of this forest, it becomes a sanctuary. The child is not feeling alone anymore, not even as an adult. We simply begin to feel whole when we integrate both of these parts of ourselves, and when we, so to say, bring these old woundings forth to the light. And guys, then we can talk about how these woundings, once when brought to light, they kind of change from reactivity to responsivity. So this, in a way, becomes this coherence of wholeness. So when we speak about this emotional reactivity as adults, so most of the adults which are emotionally reactive, we can in a way conclude that this is the inner child that is in charge. But emotional responsibility, that means that the adult has returned, integrated back into the body, in the spirit of one personality. So healing then, it becomes an act of building a coherent relationship between these two, integrating the child. And in these moments when we get triggered, we can stop and ask, who is speaking right now? And what age is this reaction? And what is the deeper unmet need? And then when we ask ourselves these questions, we are immediately becoming the observer of our thoughts and our projections. And we are shifting this from the unconscious projection to conscious response. And this is the start of healing. And this, the goal of this is actually coherence, of course, harmony again. So guys, when the healing processes of these inner child woundings once begin to kind of incorporate in our nervous system, then the nervous system begins to recognize safety internally. So it, in a way, stops outsourcing safety to others. And this is a great emotional relief, because this is the end of codependency. And this is the beginning of our own magnetic presence. So when we project consciously, and let's take as an example, projecting love consciously. So to project love, that's a divine thing. And we are all projectors in a way. But when our projector is full of these unhealed shadows, what we call love is often, it shows like a survival in costume, like a deceit, you know. And the true reflection of love then requires that we kind of have this clean inner mirror, like a very clean, clear inner. So that we also consciously choose polarity. How do we wish to give? How do we wish to receive? So that we stay conscious about our ability to remain in coherence, even when our partners or our surroundings are triggered, practicing staying really in balance, in responsivity. So then, if we're able to integrate and to practice all these things from the conscious parts of our mind, then our healed love then becomes like a rich field, and it becomes like this feeling of this sanctuary. So let me, just as an example, I love poetry, guys. I just want to read another poem of Rumi, which touches this subject, really, this shadowy inner child parts of ourselves. So Rumi says, don't run away from the grief, O soul. Look for the remedy inside the pain, because the rose came from the thorn and the ruby came from a stone. Do not grieve that you are wounded. That wound is the passage, and that pain is the compass. That child is not lost. She is waiting. So it's a beautiful poem, which is made a long time ago, hundreds of years ago, which still can be used in our modern times to reflect upon ourselves. And how can we reach this state where our life then becomes a sanctuary as we reintegrate these wounded parts of ourselves and create this coherent state in our nervous system. So guys, let's have a few reflecting questions and a little bit of interaction before we proceed to the last part of our session tonight. So, first question is, what is the core emotional wound that you still carry from childhood? If any one of you guys is willing to share, I'd be very happy.
Abandonment.
Abandonment. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know.
How about you, Miko? Would you like to share?
I would like to, but I don't know. I don't. Maybe it's the loss of parent. He didn't die, but we separated. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Well, this can also be tied a little bit to abandonment if you lost your parents in a very early age, And these woundings are actually very, very serious, but also important to work on and can be healed and brought to light. So let me ask another question, guys. How may that wound shape your relationships, choices, or emotional responses?
Well, I obviously fear that my relationships end, and thus I am more careful in my relationships and more conscious, or try to be. But am I really?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it gives sense. Thank you very much, Miko. Another question, guys. In what ways, and if there's any ways, do you project unresolved needs onto others? If there's any of these projections with you guys. Well, it's okay. We can ask another question. How would your life shift if you brought loving awareness into your inner child?
Well, it has. Back to the previous question, I had entered most of my adult relationships expecting those relationships to end. I had entered to them expecting those people to leave me. I didn't expect them to last. I had already planned for them to end. I didn't feel worthy of them staying. I just expected them to leave me. I've done a lot of inner work, a lot of inner child work, and a lot of shadow work to get to the point that I am now. And I don't expect people to leave me anymore. I don't hold on super tight. That's what I was doing in those other relationships because I expected them to leave. I was holding on too tight to try to make them stay and forcing them to leave. I don't do that anymore. I now, if they're meant to be in my life, they're in my life. If they're not, they're not. So I'm good with people coming and going now. I understand that not everybody is meant to be in my life forever. Some people are meant to be there for a season. Some are meant to be there for forever. And I'm good with that now. So because I've recognized what I was doing, I recognize because my father left me, because my grandfather pretty much abandoned me and my mom, and my grandmother died at an early age. I did a lot of work and understood what those losses in my early life did to me, that I started holding on to everybody too tightly, where because I just assumed everybody was going to leave me. So I was holding on too tightly and I was forcing them to leave. I don't do that anymore.
Thank you, Trisha. Thank you for sharing it wholeheartedly. It's very brave, sharing such, deeper stuff, deeper emotional stuff from within ourselves. But obviously, you have brought these abandonment woundings to the light, and you're conscious and you're observing and you're aware, which is key. Awareness, conscious awareness, observation, key to be having these woundings really healed and integrated so that we can reach this state of calm, of presence and coherence, which is actually the natural state.
It took a long time and a lot of emotional turmoil to get to this point. But and it's still a struggle sometimes. I still backslide here and there, but at least I'm aware of it and I can catch myself.
Good. Beautiful. Thank you, Trisha, for sharing. And guys, thank you. This was a very interesting and also very intimate sharing from your sides. And I thank you for that, truly, both of you, Miko and Trisha. So guys, we are at this part of the session where we are going to have this guided outro meditation, and we are going to install in a way these parts back to wholeness, these wounded parts of ourselves. We're going to call upon these energies to heal these unhealed parts of ourselves in the last part of the session. So friends, sit or lie comfortably. Let's touch our hearts. However it feels right for you, prayer pose, or just touch your heart. You can even place one hand on your heart, one hand on your lower belly. And let's just breathe for a while. allowing ourselves to fully relax and to drop into this state of calm. Now, imagine a small child in front of you. And this is you, energetically. This is the one who still waits for your love. Now, invite the child in. Invite the child within you and let them step into your heart. Now, in your mind, you say to this child, I see you and I love you. I will never abandon you again. Now, envision a ray of solar gold light radiating from above, and it enters your crown, regenerating the masculine principle. And then allow the silver lunar light to rise from Mother Earth and to stabilize and harmonize the feminine energies and the principles within our energy fields. Now let's allow these two currents to spiral around our spines and allowing them to meet at our heart. And now allow this light of the lunar and solar energies to bathe your inner child. Let it wash the old wounds. Let it harmonize the nervous system. Now say to yourself in your mind, I am whole. I am both the masculine and the feminine. And I am love itself. And now let's call upon the infinite energy of the quantum field. Allowing abundance of all forms to enter our field. Emotional, relational, creative, financial abundance. Let all these emotions enter our field. And now let's sit in stillness for a few minutes and allow this energy to integrate. So guys, on your own time, whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. You are home now. Thank you for being here, guys. Today, our session is over. But before we finish off completely, I want to share you about the content of our next session. So we will be talking about emotion as a compass in next module. And this will in a way become our reclamation of our emotional intelligence. It's going to in a way hone and repair our inner GPS, our broadcasting signals from our field. So we will also explore how feelings and emotions shape frequency and how coherence is unlocking clarity. We are also going to see how to decode our heart's signals in real time. So this will in a way become emotional mastery. So guys, thank you, and let's feel our way home together. And I would love to invite you to, especially on this subject of healing the inner child, to work on a little bit of journaling reflection post-session, post this session. I am most certainly going to invest a little bit of time on reflection. So thank you for being here, and I hope to see you tomorrow again. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.